Running the floor. Embiid stuffs it.
Harden for three. James Harden with his second triple.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Pick Swap Podcast. It's me and Sean Barnard as usual, but Sean and I have some exciting news. So I'll pass it over to Sean. You can introduce this new era of the Pick Swap Media.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Exciting stuff. Rebranding as Pick Swap Media for the channel. We're going to have a couple other new podcasts popping up on here. You're going to hear from James and Asher coming up later this week, and a couple more exciting news still to come later on. So we're going to be still doing our thing as usual, but there's going to be a couple new faces popping in and dropping their stuff as well. So it's all a part of getting bigger and growing, and I'm excited to see where this all goes. So getting the ball rolling now. The first week as Pick Swap Media is underway now, and for us, it's kind of the same deal. We're going to be doing our thing as usual. So all good stuff.
Yeah. Stick around for, us, but make sure you tune in for James and Asher, and we'll be adding a few more little things down the line. We appreciate you guys, as always, sticking around and supporting us through this all. So before we get into today's podcast, we want to thank our sponsor, BetUS, one of the leading sportsbook and casinos in the market. We're fully fledged into the NBA playoffs. There's a lot more betting going on. I know a ton of people bet on baseball. I don't personally. I feel like it's just too... You never know who's going to win on a nightly basis. I just feel like there's no way you can actually tell what's going to happen. Golf season is in full swing. There's plenty to bet on at BetUS. So make sure you check out our BetUS and use our promo code PICKSWAP at login. You can check the bio for a link down below in the YouTube video. You can also check it in the description of the podcast to get in on the action. Get your first bet risk-free up to $500 with our code PICKSWAP. So a little bit of a dead period here. There's a lot going on around the NBA, but we're kind of in between the finals. We're closing in on that. I guess we could talk about the conference finals right now. Not all that exciting, to be honest. But closing in on the draft. There's some things going on. So what are you feeling right now?
Yeah, draft stuff's starting up, which is my favorite time of year. So got about a month till that. Conference finals, I mean, the Mavs just can't quite run with the Warriors. So that's been disappointing to watch. I love Luka, but they just don't have the horses as this Golden State team. The Celtics Heat series, I think, has been fun. Shout out Marcus Smart for coming back from the ankle injury the other night. That was impressive. That's been a battle, that series. Another one coming on soon. So it's still good basketball, still high quality basketball. A little disappointing. It's been kind of a lull in, there was such a good stretch of great playoff basketball down the wire that there's been a decent amount of blowouts in this round, which I guess has been disappointing, but hey, it's still NBA playoffs and I still love it.
Yeah, man, it's still basketball. But I just hate that series. I don't want to see any team win. I go from being all right, I could deal with this if this happens, to being I hate that team. So, tough times, tough sledding for Sixers fans, but, let's get into some of the news that we've, the rumors that have been flying around. So as many of you know, there's some rumors regarding Doc Rivers and potentially fleeing to LA to go coach the Lakers, which would be, a dream for him, considering the average age on their roster is perfect for him. No young guys. There's been some speculation about the truth of this situation. So what are you hearing right now? And, what do you believe?
Yeah, it's a lot of conflicting reports on it. I think, honestly, in this situation, whatever you want to believe, you can find enough reports to back up what you're thinking. Paul Hudrick's pretty firm on that the Sixers have no interest in dishing Doc. I think the Lakers are in hopes that the Sixers are just playing hardball and that they want to strike up the right picks and whatever deal that they have in mind for it. While the Sixers have very publicly been in defense of Doc, saying this is our guy. Personally, I do think that there is some legitimacy to it. I think there's no way that after how the last two postseasons have gone, how the tenure with Doc Rivers has been, that you can sit back and just be 100% comfortable that that's our championship coach. And it's one thing to say for sure, Doc gets blamed for a lot more than it is his fault. But I also think there's total weight behind it. He hasn't done enough to prove that he's that championship caliber coach to bring them over the edge. And we've talked about it a lot, but it's always important to note that Doc Rivers was here before Daryl Morey. Doc Rivers was not a Daryl Morey hire. So I think that's always important in context. I do think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think Doc really wants to be here anymore either. I think he's sick of the Philly scrutiny, the magnifying glass that is Philly media and Philly sports. So I think there is truth to it. I don't know if anything will actually happen. I still think it's more likely than not that Doc is back next year, but there's definitely a little hope in terms of him being traded or sent to LA, however it's worked out.
I mean, I want to start by saying this. There's no way that LA, in terms of the fan and media scrutiny, is any better than here. Like their coach got fired and he won a championship 2 seasons ago. Doc is getting freebies out here. He's coached 2 like pretty significant failures. 2 seasons that I think a lot of people will consider failures. And maybe he wasn't so much at the forefront of it this season. There's kind of a tough draw for the Sixers this year. Yeah. But he was absolutely at the forefront last year. And I would say the lead suspect or one of the 2 lead suspects in that debacle from last season. But I don't know, man. I feel like I don't know if it's smoke from Daryl Morey, but his quick and confident answer of will Doc be the coach next year? Obviously, he was sitting right next to him. So any sort of hesitation in his voice would have come off really strange. And I think with Doc being right there, it's hard to not be confident to say that he's your coach next season. But I don't know, man. It's weird that it's gone. Like, this is like what, week 3 probably or so of these rumors kind of sticking around. Maybe it's the slow news week. Maybe it's, there's not as many engaged fan bases right now. And the Lakers need to be talked about. And they are looking for a coach, and they want a notable coach. They want a coach that has a pedigree. I don't think Doc Rivers is the answer to anybody, but maybe it's true. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Juwan Howard turned down the job offer there. He'd be a great coach. He's in a better situation at Michigan. His 2 sons are there. Smart of him for staying. I mean, Doc's coached in LA before. Obviously, he's a completely different beast, Clippers versus Lakers, and I think he would be surprised how different that is if he does get thrown into that fire. I feel a little differently about Doc after this postseason. That definitely was like in a little bit closer to the burn Doc at the stake, all that kind of mentality last year. I thought he coached a very good postseason this year. And I think like the loss primarily came down to of course, Embiid missing the first 2 games and just the roster construction. This was more of an indictment on Morey than it was on Doc Rivers this year. And I think that holds weight. And also, Daryl Morey is a liar because he needs to be. Like, he's better at his job because he can sit up there and lie. He's plenty of times said, like, I'm never trading this guy, or I have no interest in this guy, and then turn around and done the exact opposite. That's part of being a general manager, part of working in a front office. So as much as like, and even when I hear like the Sixers reports, like how the Sixers are completely bought in, like, what else do you want them to say? Like, we are considering trading Doc Rivers. Like, it's all kind of posturing and everybody leaking intentionally and strategic. So it who knows how it actually works out, but I don't think it's like a shut and close case by any means. Yeah,
it's funny to think that Doc could be traded for not just the first time in his career, for the second time in his career to be traded to LA. What a weird situation to be in. I think that is the biggest thing, and I think that's part of why the connection to the Lakers is so significant, is that they would be the team willing to trade for a coach, right? Yeah. The Sixers are probably not going to fire him. Like, let's be honest. Like, there's a lot of money left on the table. And if he was going to be fired, he probably would be fired by now, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
I think the season was over. If he was going to be gone, he'd be gone.
Yeah, it's trade or he's back, I think, is pretty much it at this point. So,
which is insane.
Yeah. And I mean, with the Morey press conference, like the day after, like, this is not a situation where it should have been like a closed book, like decisions made. Like, this is an offseason that every single thing has to be reflected on, analyzed, decided. So like, he obviously has to say like he's back. That couldn't have been the case in his mind. I'm sure like there's behind the scenes stuff going on. I do think it's either trade or he's back, and I think it's more likely they're not than he's back.
Yeah, I mean, like I want to jump in really quick just to say, like, as much as I've been anti Doc Rivers, I do believe there is some truth to the fact that winning takes time. Being a successful team and a successful franchise takes time. And we've kind of sped this process up, no pun intended, to be a contender right away. And, the same thing happened before. Like, they went from being like the worst team in the league by a lot, got one like buffer year, and then they were a top 4 seed in the East, and then they've been that since, right? So the jump to being a competitor, the jump to being a contender happened so quick, and then they've had this like massive franchise-altering change with the Simmons for Harden and the way that things look right now. Like, I know that I'm anti-Doc, and I'm not going to tell you that I wouldn't be happy if there was a change in the coaching, the head coaching position, but I'm okay with bringing him back because I do genuinely believe that this does take time. And with another year of James Harden, because let's be honest, he's going to be back. I think that there is just the mixing, the chemistry building, that is important. And I do think that that is something that they are looking at as an important factor to this decision.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a reactionary NBA culture, and people are too quick to move on in a lot of situations. And I mean, we can think back to like the Jimmy Butler thing. There's countless examples with the Sixers and across the entire NBA of like rushing things to an extent that they haven't been. I agree. It does take time. In reality, Doc Rivers has not been here very long at all, and it's tough to gauge considering how many like outside, like even dating back to the Ben Simmons thing to start this year, like a guy just not completely showing up to camp and dealing with all that, and then you don't even have your second best player until James Harden is there. And granted, like Doc is not innocent in this. He's absolutely made mistakes. He's absolutely blew the development of B-Ball Paul this year that we saw in the playoffs. A guy that had not worked out, some kinks in his game that easily could have if he had gotten more time throughout the season. He has his flaws for sure, but he's far from the reason that like the Sixers are not in the spot we hope. And now to kind of get into that a little bit, that's kind of what we're mainly want to talk about today is kind of the roster construction with this. And I do think this year was more of an indictment on Morey. And I think every single player on the roster that there needs to be kind of a reflection and analysis and a look forward for what they think about going forward. So we're going to go through each player and hit me with a must trade, should explore, or can't touch. We'll start right at the top. I think this one is obvious, but Joel Embiid.
Must trade. No, right. He obviously Embiid's back, and he's going to be Sixer for life. So,
yeah, absolutely should be. Can't touch. It would break my heart if he ever suits up in another uniform. I think he's probably at his most impatient with the franchise that he's been in his entire time here. But this is a crucial offseason for everything, and I think every move needs to be regarded as it always should be. But specifically this offseason, every single move needs to be utilized, what unlocks him the best, what complements him the best. So that needs to be the outlook from the front office. We kind of talked a lot about James Harden last pod, but I think it's pretty obvious James Harden's back. So do you agree with that as well?
Yeah, I do. He's going to be back. Yeah. So I don't even think it's worth talking about because he's back.
Yeah, even kind of the sign and trade situation, which has been tossed around a little bit, that doesn't make much sense to me.
I think happen.
The question's not if, it's kind of at what cost is pretty much how the Sixers are handling this. And we kind of just got to stay tuned and hope for this. It also is interesting to me, like Harden's talked about like taking less money. I really don't know what like less money means to him. Like he could very well demand like a 3-year, $120 million. And it's like, yeah, that's not a max contract, but like you're not freeing up cap space with it. But I think it's pretty likely that Morey does a staggering of the paycheck in terms of maybe to open up a slot for like this year and backload it in the end, which of course is going to hurt when he's like older and getting that money, but the priority's got to be on building right now. So I think that's something to watch out for as the contract details emerge.
Yeah, I think so too. And to that point as well, I think that there's going to be some fancy financial footwork in the front office this offseason to make that work, because maybe we can talk about this later. Unless honestly, I'll push that back a little bit.
Yeah, sounds good. Tobias Harris.
Explore the options.
All right, I'm going must trade for Tobias.
Okay.
And I want to start off with Tobias gets a bad rap. I do genuinely like Tobias. He's been a guy that's been a model citizen, a model member of the team his entire time he's been in Philadelphia. He's made some really significant changes to his game to attempt to fit into this. But the fact of the matter is he's got over $36 million cap hit coming in next year. To free up just about any move that they want to make, it has to involve offloading that contract or subbing that for role players. Whether it's like a Tobias Harris for a few role players trade or a deal to get it off the books and open that for a player, that could come into play if there is like the Zach LaVine talks, the Bradley Beal talks, if Morey does have his eyes on a superstar. But basically, any way you cut it, the Sixers have no flexibility until they make that move. So it's kind of unfortunate. I have grown to really like Tobias, and I do respect him a ton, but he's got to go. And frankly, like, he's just not quite the guy that they were hoping he would be.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I definitely do. And there's been points in time where I was like, I absolutely have to get him off the books. I just loved what I saw from Tobias this postseason.
Yeah.
I thought as a leader and what he did throughout, the late end of the season into the postseason, I just really grew to respect him a lot. Not that I didn't before, but I just felt like there was another level to it. And I think that he's kind of, worn his emotions on his sleeve a lot. And I think there's something there to say that I think he might know that there's the end is in sight. And the poor dude's been traded like 15 times. So it's tough, but I think it's definitely reasonable to look for a Tobias Harris for, 3 guys that match contract type of deal, like whether that's to Sacramento or, wherever it might be. I'm sure we'll talk about this throughout the summer, but like, I don't mind the idea of spreading that 36 out between 3 players and getting a starter and 2 bench players, like 2 solid bench players. Like, personally, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. A quick shout out to the credit for him. Like, think about how much his role changed from the beginning of the year, where he was legitimately the number 2 alongside Embiid, with just pretty much by default of no one else being there. The first half of the season before James Harden averaged 18.7 points per game, 15 field goal attempts per game, 48.4% from the field, 3.4 3-point attempts, and shot 34.5% from 3. The second half of the year with James Harden, his points per game dropped to 14.3, only attempted 11.9 shot attempts, shot 47.7% from the field, attempted 4.6 3-point attempts, and shot 40% from 3. So his shot attempts went down, his 3-point attempts went up, both of his efficiency numbers increased, and his points per game still decreased. So just like, that's not easy to do as a professional and as a guy at this stage in his career. So as much as he's been dragged through the mud, and the contract obviously clouds a lot of opinions from it, I do think Tobias deserves his respect, and I appreciate him for his time here.
And he became like a really solid defender going into the postseason, which at the beginning of his contract, people were like, he's a very meh perimeter guy. And he became like the premier defender on this team. So no, I it's going to be a tough goodbye, I think, if he goes.
Definitely. Tyrese Maxey.
I want to keep Tyrese Maxey at all costs. Like, I think personally, there's a lot of people talking about these other stars and the third star. And I think from what we've gathered, and I know we just talked about how often Daryl Morey lies, but I do actually believe that there's no chance that Tyrese Maxey is playing in another uniform. It's just not going to happen. I don't care if it's for Zach LaVine. I really don't care if it's Bradley Beal. These guys are not worth it to me. Like, giving up Tyrese Maxey is not worth it to me.
Yeah. And how the Tobias trade I kind of expect to happen, and because of what stage he's at with 2 years left in his contract, the way that kind of converts in an NBA deal is you attach that to a young player on a cheap contract and kind of find a middle ground for the players you get back. That player better not be Tyrese Maxey, and he is as untouchable as possible in my mind. For me, it's Embiid and then Maxey, and there's a pretty massive gap between anyone else. Per Kyle Newback, he said Maxey's as close to untouchable as you could be. I also buy that. I really do believe this guy is like the future face of the franchise, the guy that will be taking the keys in the post Embiid era. And I mean, he's just a joy top to bottom, from how he plays basketball, how he interacts with everyone, his personality, and it's just a guy that you cannot be giving up on. So I have no interest in moving on from Tyrese Maxey for anyone, really, whether it's Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine, you can name it. I still am holding on to this guy in the long term for the production that he brings. And when you argue for win now, like, Tyrese Maxey still contribute to a win now team. And like, sure, he's a little undersized. Sure, he has his, like, you can point out the little holes, but the rate this guy is improving at and has improved already is so impressive to me. So just in a similar way to Embiid, it would break my heart to see him ever suit up in another uniform, and I really don't think it's going to happen.
Me either. Yeah, when you're going on this list, I think it's I think you're going into next year, and again, I know the Harden conversation is going to be there, but it's going to be Embiid, Harden, Maxey, and whatever else you have to do. What the other 12 guys are, in line. I don't know what the order is, but they can all go at some point. To make those 3 guys, put those 3 guys in a position to win a championship, to complete the team around those three guys. That's the goal. So whatever else you have to do, you got to do. But those three guys are going to remain. Is my ideology going into the offseason.
Totally agree, and I do think that's like a nice. I think Harden and Maxey are much more compatible than I even imagined in my mind. So I think that's awesome. To talk about a guy who I guess kind of was like a fan favorite Philly like pride guy that everyone loved and has really fallen from the graces very quickly. What are your thoughts on Matisse Thybulle?
I think he's going to go. I think he's on his way out. Man, it's so tough because we all loved what we saw from him for so long. And the idea was, okay, it just has to improve here, small, short steps. Well, we haven't seen it. We've seen regression. And we've seen and I don't mean to do this to be this guy, but we've seen like a lack of commitment to be a full contributor to the team. I don't know how else to put that other than it makes you seem pretentious to not have gotten a shot, to not have gotten the second shot, to play in a playoff series. To me, that's showing a lack of commitment. But regardless of that, he just was terrible the latter half of this year. And he regressed as a shooter. He regressed as an offensive player. And we really thought that him and Harden would unlock him to a degree. He really did not. And it's hard to do because everyone else got better with Harden on the floor. And somehow Thybulle, who has the play style of a player that gets better, didn't happen. I think you can get. There's something out there to get for Matisse Thybulle, and I think that's another part of why he might go. There's value there.
Yeah. In my mind, Matisse Thybulle is an absolute must trade. He's probably at the top of my list on the Sixers roster for who needs to be traded. He's just a flawed NBA basketball player. And I mean, obviously we see in the half court the issues it creates. We talked so much after the Ben Simmons trade about like how much cleaner the half court's going to look when guys like can't sit in the paint. We see these exact same issues with Matisse Thybulle out there, except Matisse can't pass or dribble in the way that Ben Simmons can. Ben Simmons could and provided that to the team. And defensively, like he for sure is like a block and a steal machine and makes these eye-popping plays, but he's also flawed in the way he defends in terms of team defense. Like when you watch these NBA playoffs and look at these like top tier contending teams, every single player is so connected defensively. And like team defense is much more important than individual defense in terms of knowing when to rotate, knowing when to pass off a guy, knowing when to drop, when to cover. Matisse, like the way he defends is so like spastic and like flying his limbs around. It just doesn't quite work. And Joel Embiid's a guy that he makes bad a lot on the defensive end because Thybulle loves like coming from behind for the pokes or the blocks. When you're doing that, your man is in front of you. That's demanding another guy to step up. And it happens all the time where Embiid steps up to pick up his man, and it's a simple bounce pass, and then Embiid's man scores. And that just like doesn't work on a defensive aspect. And I agree that there's absolute value there. I mean, this guy's back-to-back second team All-NBA defender. You absolutely can get something for him. And I think that contributes to the decision as well. But like, I just don't see him ever developing offensively to where he can play more minutes than he already does. His minutes per game dropped by 10 minutes from regular season to postseason. And some of that was obviously with the shot and with like once he got out of the rotation with that, it kind of contributed. But it also just like teams gave him zero respect on their defensive end. Like don't even acknowledge that he's there. And you just cannot win like that. I don't think he can ever contribute to like a championship contending team.
Yeah, I mean, or he's years away from it. And I'm okay with moving on for that. Like, you could probably tell I was just looking at my phone very briefly. I just looked up to see Bruce Brown Jr.'s contract. He's a free agent. So like, if you're looking for a guy that doesn't shoot and plays really good defense, there's a guy available that you could probably get for, same price, maybe even a little bit cheaper, that has great chemistry with James Harden.
Yeah. Shouting out James Harden on his story yesterday.
On his Instagram story. And that loves to play with James Harden, can be a small five at times, and is a great cutter and a great guy out of the dunker spot. So like these guys, like I know Matisse, like what he does is like very appealing, and it's attractive when he's playing well and he's blocking Steph Curry's jumper and he's blocking Devin Booker's jumper. But like there's guys out there that do this. You almost probably think that like Torrey Craig and like guys like Bruce Brown and these guys are as impactful as a defender for what they do. They're not the freak athlete and like quirky defensive player that Thybulle is, but they do guard the best players in the league and do it well. There's guys out there that do this. So like, I don't
And
know.
I don't think it's better to like block a shot versus force a missed shot. Like his stats look great because he makes like the eye popping plays and everything. A guy like think about like a PJ Tucker who just like makes the guy work for all 24 seconds he's guarding him and never let him get like a free shot off. That is just as valuable as if you like block a shot and like sure like that guy has like a chance of making it if he's doing like a fadeaway, whatever, forcing him into a bad shot. But like in
Right.
terms of just like I don't think Matisse can stay connected enough defensively with the rest of the roster to like contribute in winning ways. And he's 25 years old. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure that's still
He's
like
not
plenty of
young.
like, I'm sure he's still got plenty of time to develop and all that. But like, that's not like we're not talking about like Tyrese Maxey's 21 and look at the rate that he improved versus what we've seen from Matisse in 3 seasons. It just kind of is not there. And it's very frustrating. And in the postseason pressers with Doc and Daryl, they talked about how like they're more patient because they can tell he's like putting in the work and like doing all this. But it's like I have to see it to some extent. Like it's great if you can go like this guy should be shooting like 1,000 3-point corner 3-pointers every single day this offseason. And it's like that simple. If he could become like an inadequate 3-point shooter, his career trajectory changes completely. But like he just looks scared to shoot the ball or do basic offensive functions most of the time he's on the court.
Yeah, and like again, it's no disrespect at all. Like I really don't mean it to be disrespectful. I'm just saying like this is not like this is the NBA. You know,
Yeah.
you get paid on what you do, what you actually do. And I'm sure of it. I'm sure he's in the gym. I'm sure he's putting the work in. I'm sure he's a professional. He's getting paid a lot of money to be a professional. I'm sure he is, no doubt. But it hasn't translated. It hasn't, started to peak out. There's been flashes. There's been stretches. Okay, he can put the ball in the basket. Even early on with Harden, there was like a real natural ability with the screen and roll and the cutting and everything, and it just vanished. I don't know if they're banking on that being a reliable source of offense for him going forward. But I don't know. I mean, they sounded not that upset about it, but again, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors in those press conferences.
Yeah, definitely. This one's tough to me, but Danny Green.
Yeah, it's tough because you don't want to just say get him out of here because he's hurt. But again, this is the NBA. You're looking to save some money. He is non-guaranteed. You can get him off the books and clear up $10 million by tomorrow. Maybe not by tomorrow. I don't know exactly when that happens, but you get the gist. I don't know. I loved Danny in the playoffs. He was really good in the playoffs, and it sucked that it ended the way that it did. But Danny Green during the regular season was like public enemy number 1 for me for a while. I think I campaigned on this podcast like a few times saying like he needs to go. But again, you love DG, but he was, he's hardly the player he was, a couple of years ago. And now he has a pretty significant knee injury that's going to take him a long time to get back from. Like he's not going to be back until halfway through next year. Like if we're lucky, like Jamal Murray, I don't like think about the last time you saw Jamal Murray play basketball and they had a similar knee injury.
Jamal Murray is,
like he is a younger guy. And I don't know. I just don't know. It sucks. The situation really does suck, but I don't know if they can like logically hold on to him.
Yeah, it's tough. I first off, I'm a Danny Green guy. I think I love what he does on a basketball court in terms of like winning habits, contributing to a team, spacing the floor, doing things that don't show up in the stat sheet. I think he's like impactful beyond what is shown. He was kind of such an analytical mystery this year in terms of like he looked terrible out there, but the lineups looked better when statistically when he was on the court. And like to me that does hold weight. I think like his leadership, the personality, the veteran presence is all needed on the Sixers team. I think the plan was when that contract was signed last offseason was that for him to be traded after this offseason. It's a very tradable contract. The $10 million cap hit is very friendly for deals and easy to work with. The injury definitely changes things a little bit. It's tough, like doing a guy dirty. He's already said that he's like coming back. He's not going to retire. He wants to go out on his own terms. I'm okay with like a Danny Green that comes back mid-season and only has a playoff run in him. Like that's all we're asking for him, really. He's a guy you can plug in on any NBA lineup for limited minutes and he can do his thing. He's for sure beyond what we all know. He's well over like the prime of his career, but he's still a guy that contribute. I think they have to explore I think it's more likely than not that he is traded just for cap reasons and fitting it in there. But I will miss Danny Green if he is gone. I am a fan of what he does on the court.
Yeah, he recaptured me as a fan late in this season. I think the dunk might have done it in the Raptors series. That dunk might have done it for me. And if that's the last memory we have of Danny Green as a Sixer, we'll take it. But yeah, I think it'll be tough. I think that's a really just a shitty situation for all parties. I don't think the Sixers want to do him that dirty. I don't think they want to hang him out to dry like that. But I also think that they have to keep their best interest in mind. And I think at this point, their best interest is to use that $10 million elsewhere. Cause it's, that's a useful $10 million that they clearly, need.
Definitely. George Niang.
I'm okay with George. I know this postseason was rough for him, rough for him. But I also think the situation at hand, I think the lack of wing depth screwed him. Because you were asking him to play a wing, and he is not. He is clearly not. I think George is great. I mean, statistically, as a shooter, he just had a shitty stretch. Bad time to have a shitty stretch because he was one of our more reliable guys throughout the season. But he's going to be better than that. And he was better than that for much of the season. I think he's great, again, as a leader, as a guy, a locker room guy. I think George is going to be back. I want him back personally. So just the role, it has to be different in the playoffs. And the role that he played during the season is totally fine with me. But the fact that they didn't have any playable wings is the reason why he got exposed so significantly in the postseason. So you remedy one situation, you kind of upgrade again at the other situation. So I think George stays.
Yeah, that was pretty much the point that I wanted to make is I honestly want him back next year. I do not want him playing playoff minutes next year. And he's a guy that you love to have on your roster in terms of he brings energy, he does his thing, he plays his game, a regular season player that he will have his nights in the regular season. He had his nights in the regular season where he knocked down a big three, knocked down 3 or 4 threes, flexing to the crowd, talking shit to the benches. That's awesome. That's also totally fine to have that guy and have zero expectations for him to play in the playoffs. He should be a guy on that 9th or 10th bench spot that when you chop down to crunch time, an 8-man rotation, he's not in it. And that's all totally okay. The lack of wing depth absolutely exposed him. He was being asked to guard guys he should have no business guarding, to play in a style that he should have no business playing. But both these things can be true, though. We want him back, and he should not be playing playoff minutes. And I mean, the Sixers' depth was put on full display in this playoffs, and I think he's probably the number one prime example of it. He's obviously limited in what he does. He's a 6'7", chubby little power forward that just lets it fly from deep. And I love that he's around. He's great for the vibes, but that's kind of my stance on him. I hope he's back next year overall, though.
Yeah, and I also feel like you can slot him into certain rotations and keep him. I don't know. I feel like there's ways around him to, not exploit him defensively, but, allow him to flourish offensively. I think there are creative ways to do that. I just don't think that they had the ability to do that this year. And the fact that they had to play small with most of their backup lineups, it was tough because he just doesn't do that well. But yeah, I love George. I do.
Yeah, he competes his heart out. He brings it every night, even with him being limited. Furkan Korkmaz.
I'm sorry, buddy.
Oof.
I'm sorry, buddy. He's gone. I think to me, he's got to go. And that hurts. That hurts my heart to say as a Furkan guy. But he's not good. And he's too streaky, and the good isn't good enough, and the bad is too bad. And again, he fell out of the rotation this year, and he just got a new contract. We thought he was going to get paid this offseason. He took a little bit of a pay cut to stay here, and I think that it's time for him to move on. I wish him the best wherever he goes, but that $5 million has got to be used better somewhere else.
Yeah, I unfortunately agree, and I have nothing but love for Furkan.
Yeah,
but
it's love.
Yeah, it is, but it's time. And I would say Matisse is still higher on my list of must-go than Furkan, but the fact of the matter is neither one of them are good enough to play rotational minutes from the wing, and that's a problem right there. So I agree. It needs to be reshuffled. It needs to be moved on. And it was very disappointing this year to watch him just kind of shoot himself out of the rotation and go stretches of time without even seeing the floor. That really is not for a guy 24, approaching 25, and seemingly hitting his stride for his career. It was tough to see that. So I feel bad for him, and hopefully new location, he gets his mind straight again.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it money wise, right? If you're thinking about trading Danny Green, there's 10 right there. And then between Thybulle and Furkan, there's another 9.5 or a little over 9.5. So you're creating just right there. I obviously, again, you have to match the contracts. Everything has to work. But when you're talking about where $20 million is spent, if you're thinking many other teams are thinking one way and you're thinking Thybulle, Korkmaz, and Green, like that 20 million has to be, if this team wants to compete for a championship, like though that money right there is the integral change that has to be made. It sucks because you like all those guys. They're good people. They're good players, but they're just not good enough to have that money be spent on them in that situation. That's my thought process.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense and totally agree. Shake Milton, a little bit different situation, but I feel somewhat the same. How about you?
To me, Shake is like, I don't know the best way to put this, but he's like so cheap right now that it almost makes less sense to trade him. Like, I understand moving him. I think he kind of is what he is at this point. I still do like Shake. This year was weird for him, but like, again, what he's making, $1.4 million this year. Like, where's that value? Where are you going to get a player for 1.4 that's better? You know what I mean? Maybe if he's a sweetener, someone likes him for that contract, and within a Tobias trade, if it's Shake that gets moved, if it's within one of those other deals that's being made, if it's Shake that gets moved, I'm not heartbroken. But for the money, I don't know.
This is how I feel about it. Is think about like how much we've talked about how much this team like lacks like a dog mentality or like all out effort all the time. I feel like backup point guard is like the number one circled spot for like bringing that. Like think about how many backup point guards like come in the game and like pick up full court and like do that kind of thing. Shake is so just like he's just so smooth in his approach and like he's just
chill.
Like there's games where you genuinely like don't even realize he's on the court and he just kind of goes through his motion, does his thing. Like I want a guy who makes his presence felt when we're talking about a second unit guard. Like think about like TJ McConnell, and obviously like throwback for the process days, but like if TJ McConnell's in Shake Milton's shoes, like we know he's there every single game. He's increasing the energy every time he's on the court. I think you can find guys for a similar contract as Shake Milton who have that mentality and have that effort level. And I mean, Shake's obviously skilled. He obviously has some things that he does very well. I think there's plenty of teams around the NBA that would be more than willing to give him a chance. But I think for me, when we talk about like making them changes, backup point guard's like pretty close to the top of the list of where it needs to happen. And Shake just doesn't really bring that aspect of the game.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Like, I don't have any problems with that. I like Shake personally. I think he's a good player. It is like it. I think either way, to me, it's going to kind of be it is what it is. Like genuinely, I don't think he's a playoff rotation guy. He has one playoff game in him every postseason. He has one. So maybe throw him in there when times get tough. But like, he's the 12th guy, right? So I don't know. It is what it is. Either way, I look at it. It is. If he's here next year, it is what it is. If he's gone next year, it is what it is. Not much more to it for me personally.
Yeah. How about this one? I feel strongly about B-ball Paul.
I think Paul should be here. I think Paul should be here because I think there's a lot of untapped potential in there. I think that this is like the year for him. I think this upcoming season is the year for him. I think they can like it. He just provides a lot of creativity to this roster. You can get weird with him and it'd be okay. And I think that there's a lot there that is exciting. So I think Paul should be here next year.
Yeah, this is going to sound like a joke, but I mean this completely seriously. If I'm going through my untouchable list, it goes Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, B-ball Paul. And I love everything about what he brings to the game, the all-out effort, the all-out hustle, the trying his ass off every second he's out there. And just he's a step toward modern basketball in a way that the Sixers just have lacked so much. Like the way he's switchable, the way he can guard on the perimeter, the way he just brings pure madness in a positive way. And just like him, he can absolutely be the backup center. And we'll talk about Bassey right after this, but like him and Bassey are absolutely what they need to be developing in terms of Embiid's long-term backups and guys that can bring it. I just love Paul Reed. He said he wants to add 10 to 15 inches to his vertical this offseason, which is absolutely insane, but I love him for it. He's a guy that I want to have a real chance next year in terms of playing real deal minutes throughout the entire season, and I think he's going to show why he belongs.
Yeah, he's a dog. He's
Yeah.
a dog. He's one of the guys that has that in them on this roster already. I think it's important for them to groom that in the right way, and I think they will. I'm hopeful for Paul going forward. I don't know if he's number 3 on my untouchable list, but I do like Paul.
Yeah, I do think he like rejuvenated his long-term hopes with the end of the season, the way he played,
They
the
did.
playoff stretch, everything. I think in Doc Rivers and the organization's mind that changed things in a lot of ways, and I'm very happy he got the chance to do that, and he brought it. Last ones here, we'll lump all these together. Jaden Springer, Isaiah Joe, and Charles Bassey. How do you feel about the 3 of those overall?
I'm unconcerned, I guess is the right way to put it. I mean, I like all those guys, don't get me wrong. They talked really, really glowingly about Springer, which was surprising. I mean, he's a kid, right? Like he is a young guy. Again, like I don't mind them being on this roster. I don't. I like all those guys individually. I like who they are as players. I think Isaiah Joe, but like Isaiah Joe is uninspiring to me. We liked a lot of what he did. Again, he's still super young. I'm not going to count him out by any means. I like Bassey a lot. I think if I'm ranking them, at Bassey's number 1. But I don't know, man. Like you can't be concerned over those guys. Like 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, unless they're Tyrese Maxey, like you can't be too concerned about that. Like they're not going to help this year. They're not going to help next year. Maybe Springer could be a really solid NBA defender. Maybe Isaiah Joe can be a really solid NBA shooter, but like you got to go get those guys that are like you confirm that those guys are good shooters. Like you'd rather have a guy that's proven it than one of these guys in this situation right now, like where the Sixers are in their position. You got to get win now guys. So if it costs you 1 or 2 of those guys, it is what it is. But I do like them.
It's frustrating not to have a read on all these guys. Like, and this is once again falling on Doc for not trialing out or not giving guys like. And I get they're young. I get they all have holes, but to me, that's really no excuse. Like you look at the Golden State Warriors, Jonathan Kuminga started a game in the conference semifinals that is playing rotational minutes for the team that's about to win the championship this year. And that's a guy who is 18 years old, who his knock on him coming into the draft last year, a guy who played for the G League Ignite, went right to the pros after that. He was a guy who had all this polish, who didn't quite have the pieces together, was the 7th overall pick. And he's just like a pure hustle guy and does the little things for them because like they clearly give him a job, tell him to do these things, and he tries and he gives it all his effort. And there's no reason why the Sixers can't do the same thing with these guys. And like they have skill sets that like can be useful, and you give them like the 1 or 2 things to fully focus on doing, and they will do it. So to me, it's frustrating, like not to have a clear idea of it. I've seen all these guys a decent bit in the G League. I'm a big fan of Jaden Springer. I think long-term he's going to be very good, but he's for sure still very raw. He's a little bit like Jimmy Butler, like in the way he like gets to his spot, does a lot of mid-range, uses his body very well. He's got a very like NBA body already, even as young as he is, and he's going to be a very good defender. He locks up in the G League. I also think Bassey's legitimate long-term. Isaiah Joe, I'm probably the lowest on out of the 3 of them. I do think these guys are all pretty likely to be attached to Tobias or something, Tobias, Furkan, or some variation of that. It's not anything to lose sleep over. But I do believe in Bassey and Springer specifically long term. I believe in very highly.
Yeah, I think Springer is the most intriguing.
Yeah,
he's a mystery. Like he was a mystery last year. Still is. Again, he's one of those guys that isn't complete by any means. But I think the problem is I don't think people need to think that he is. I think they just need to see that he's like growing. It feels like this team would rather have G League MVPs than rotational players. So they'll keep their good guys down in the G League to rack up those MVPs and that playoff success in the G League and kind of forego their actual NBA growth. But I don't know, man. I'm okay with all of them being on the roster next year. But again, if it's part of a deal that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of them have to go, so be it. It's the life of the NBA player, right?
Yeah, there is something off about like the Sixers tracked in terms of like draft a guy, G League pros, like however like the pathway is, it's just not quite defined enough. And I get each guy is like at a different stage of their development, that kind of thing. But it feels like they do a lot more of just just leave them in the G League, let them do their thing. When like way more teams are like strategic and like how they're tracking the develop, do all that. And that's something that in the long term, I think is like a legitimate concern that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know though. I mean, I want to be fair to say that like I don't pay attention that closely to what other like franchises G League's plans are. So I can't like put too much thought into that, but yeah, it is weird. I mean, you kind of like literally for like 3 months I forgot that Bassey and Springer existed. Like they just were banished to the G League. Even the Sixers were like going through COVID, like or had injuries at points of time in the season, and it was just like James Springer just does not exist here. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do. Doc Rivers seemed to really like him, so it will be interesting to see what his plan is, if he's back.
Yeah. And we'll see. That's about all we got for this offseason episode. We'll get into some more kind of specifics for moves and that kind of thing, but I want to do a nice little roster check-in. So any final thoughts, James?
No, man, I think that was necessary. I feel like we're pretty much on the same page for most of this. And I mean, I do have a feeling, I guess I can kind of wrap up what I was saying earlier. I feel like there's going to be some things happening this year. I don't think it's as like cut and dry as it may seem. I think that Morey's going to get creative, because clearly this roster is not good enough. I think there's going to be a lot of turnover, which is good and bad, but I think the guys that do need to go will go. And I do think that there's going to be significant changes in the starting rotation. So stay tuned for that, because I do think it's going to happen. The draft is in like a month. That is going to be a big day. And then the weeks following that will be big. So there's a lot to be. I hate this because I don't want to be talking about the draft in the offseason, but there is, some significant reasons to be excited about the upcoming months.
There's back against the wall, a lot to watch coming up. So I definitely think there's some big changes. I think this is probably the last time we've seen Tobias Harris, Furkan, Matisse, and probably a couple other guys in a Sixers uniform. So we'll be interested to see what the new blood looks like and see what the moves end up looking. But yeah, we'll stay tuned, and we'll be talking with you guys next time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. If you want to do real quick, the follow Sean at Sean_Barnard1. Follow me at JSbrain17. Make sure you're here on Wednesday. James and Asher will be doing their first episode of the 215 Scoop, so that'll be fun. Make sure you check out BetUS and use our promo code PickSwap at login for your first bet, risk-free up to $500. And make sure you're keeping up with PickSwap Media, and we'll be in touch.